Alright guys, welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be tackling a very important issue, and that is the overwhelming amount of podcasts out there, right? With so many options available, it is so easy to get lost and start listening to people who have no expertise in the field that they're talking about. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love podcasts. I listen to them every day. If it weren't for a podcast, we actually might never have had the chance to listen to some very successful people talk about and walk us through how they became successful and how they achieved the things that they did. However, it is essential to be very cautious as to who you're listening to. With just a camera and a microphone, just about anyone can go out there and put out long-form content talking about various topics. And as people who think critically and have a mind of our own, it is very important that we check the biases of who we're listening to and evaluate just how truthful and reliable the information that they're providing really is. In this video, I'm going to share with you 3 podcast gems that have absolutely changed my life. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around for the very last one. Due to the nature of my personality, most of these podcasts are going to be focused around finance, business, as well as self-improvement. Though at first, these podcasts might seem a bit strange to you, I am living proof that the content within these shows will add tons of value to your life and help you grow as a better person as well as a better entrepreneur. It's also very important to understand that in order for you to learn from somebody, you don't have to agree with everything they say. In fact, you could disagree with most things somebody says and still be able to learn from them. So without further ado, let's jump into the very first podcast, and that's going to be the Joe Rogan Experience 1309, which featured guest speaker Naval Ravikant. I am so sorry if I butchered that name. Do not come for me. Naval Ravikant is a tech entrepreneur, angel investor, and an overall leader in the field of technology as well as self-development. He has made huge contributions to the startup ecosystem, both through investing as well as founding companies. Naval founded AngelList, which is a company that helps connect young tech entrepreneurs to investors as well as venture capitalists. Outside of the tech industry, Naval has made it his life's mission to teach people how to take over control of their lives and actively choose to be happy, rich, and healthy. According to Naval, we're actually able to choose for the most part to be rich, wealthy, and healthy. And to make that mission come to fruition, he has actually put out countless hours of content surrounding those 3 topics. Now, while Naval promised to deliver on all 3 of those topics, 3 years ago he released a 3-hour-long video that breaks down how to generate wealth to its very core. Now listen guys, Naval gives so much more than your typical drop shipping, how to make money video, okay? Trust me on that one. And in that video, Naval takes a deep dive into how some people are able to generate insane amounts of wealth while most people will just be always chasing their next paycheck. In this episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, both speakers touch on the lessons they learned about how to accumulate wealth, live happily, and how to build healthy lifestyles. Now, I can't even begin to explain how good this podcast really is. And so, if you take anything out of this video, guys, let that be that you must listen to the Joe Rogan Experience 1309. Alright, now, the podcast number 2 is going to be the Mindset Mentor, and there's no specific episode I'm referring to. This whole podcast overall is just a straight dub. The podcast is hosted by Rob Dial, who's a motivational speaker as well as an entrepreneur. In the podcast, he shared strategies, insights, and techniques on how to develop a growth mindset and how to overcome obstacles, both in business as well as in self-development. Rob provides very easy to implement techniques that can help you achieve all sorts of goals, from losing weight to starting a business or just getting through depression or a very hard breakup. The reason why I like Rob's podcast so much is due to how easy and digestible the information really is. Most of Rob's episodes are only about 20 minutes, and in those 20 minutes, there's always so much to unpack. I usually listen to the podcast on my way to work, when I'm doing cardio at the gym, or when I'm just doing chores or, work around the house. A lot of the times, he openly shares his struggles, which makes him really relatable and really inspiring to his audience. I really think that his authentic and very energetic personality is what really resonates with people seeking motivation and some guidance. In my experience, this podcast has been so helpful because it doesn't take that much to listen to it, right? Just 20 minutes, you're driving to work, you're washing dishes, and you can get a really good message in those times that you usually would just be listening to music. Once you do listen to the podcast, you always come out of it so motivated, ready to go, fired up. And I think that that's why the podcast has grown so much in recent years. All right, guys, let's move on to podcast number 3. And that's going to be Ferrari Talk, specifically the episode that talks about building your image. This podcast is hosted by Jeff Logan, and I am officially putting everybody on. So if you ever share this podcast, which I know you will, I will be seeking my creds. With only 250,000 views, I know that sounds like a lot, but in the world of podcasts, that's nothing. The message behind this podcast has not been heard by most people, okay? I'll be honest, I had personally never heard of this Jeff Logan guy, but I'm really glad that I did and that I ran across his podcast. In the podcast, Jeff talks about how important it really is to build your image, how to protect it, and how to leverage it to help you build connections, generate wealth, and build status. The information Jeff shares is nothing out of this world. In fact, a lot of us have already heard these concepts, but the reason why this podcast deserves a spot on this list is due to perspective Jeff really walks us through. There were tons of aha moments in this podcast when I first listened to it, but also when I re-listened to podcasts. Also, if you're listening to the podcast and you only listen to it once, you're not going to be able to retain not even 50% of the content you listen to, okay? Hack number 2, I'm getting a little sidetracked over here, but it's going to be this right here, okay? You need to take notes. When I'm listening to podcasts, I'm taking notes, okay? When you're listening to podcasts, there's only so much information your brain can comprehend, digest, and really hold on to, right? For that reason, you need to stop, re-listen to it, and take notes. All right, back to the podcast. And aside from learning how to be more successful, this podcast really takes a deep dive into helping you understand yourself as a person and who you truly are. It teaches you how to think highly of yourself and how to look within to figure out what your values really are and what are areas of improvements in your characters, in your values, in your routine, in the people around you. I truly do believe that all of us can extract tons of value out of this video, and for that reason, I want more people to know about it. All right, guys, podcast number 4. This is gonna be a wild one, okay? Now, hear me out. Before I let you know what that podcast is, I need to explain myself in a few things. Now, first off, you know I would never do you guys wrong, and I would never recommend something that I didn't truly believe in. Additionally, it is very important to understand that as a mature and intelligent person, you're able to learn from what somebody has to say, even if you don't agree with a lot of the things that they say. Now, on the surface, while the people that host this podcast might seem like total idiots who make videos for the internet, behind the scenes, these guys have been able to build a multi-million-dollar business. They have built their image on social media and pop culture and have been able to accumulate immense amounts of wealth, all through doing what they love to do. In this episode, they actually bring somebody on who has been the topic of headlines for the past couple of months. This person was able to grow from broke to owning millions of dollars in supercars as well as other assets. Though this person has said some things that many would find offensive and disagree with, I do believe there's a lot to be learned by filtering the things that you don't necessarily agree with. Now, I have thought about this many times, right? I would not put my name or reputation on the line if I didn't truly think that you could learn a lot from this. Now, without further ado, you probably already know who I'm talking about, but I am talking about the Full Send Podcast, episode 64, featuring Andrew Tate. Now, in case you have been living under a rock, Andrew Tate is an American entrepreneur, public figure, and kickboxing champion. Now, Tate has been in the spotlight for the past couple of months, mainly for his controversial topics. From what I have noticed, the media loves to focus on the controversial things Tate has said. Of course, that's what gets people riled up and gets the views up, right? Now, Tate has a lot of hot takes, especially when it comes to women and how they should behave in his opinion. I personally don't agree with most things he has to say in that department, but surprisingly, guys, that's only about 10 to 20% of the message that Tate really wants to spread. In fact, in one of the latest podcasts he did, he talked about how he doesn't like talking about those topics and he wants to talk more about business and what he so calls the matrix, but it seems as though everybody wants to talk about his takes on that. Now, Tate has given massive insights into how to become a better man, how to stay true to your morals, and how to build your own path when it comes to your career. Now, to put this in context, Andrew Tate has actually already been on the Full Send Podcast before, a couple of months prior to shooting this episode 64, where he stated that he would eventually get canceled, and it was just a matter of time before what he calls the Matrix to make their first attempt at silencing him. In episode 64, Tate returns to the podcast, this time in his Dubai penthouse, after the cancellation that he predicted actually came to fruition. Now, I will be honest with you, the first half of the podcast is really irrelevant to you if you have no interest in what the cancellation process is all about, and Tate's takes on how it was also coordinated and how much much of a problem tech censorship really is. I would still say it's worth to listen, but unless you know who Tate is and what this is all about, this might not add a lot of value to your life. However, the second half of this podcast was extremely enlightening. In the second half of the pod, host Bradley Martin asks Tate deep questions about learning how to love and accept yourself, when a man is ready to take the next step and start a family, and how young men can learn to better position themselves to step into leadership roles and succeed in their careers. I truly do believe this podcast has a lot of lessons to be learned, and if you're a man, you should definitely give it a try. Now, it is almost certain that you will disagree with a lot of things Tate has to say. I mean, the man has no filters, right? And many of his views go completely against what the Western society has taught you since you grew up as a kid. Now, I will not support or condemn Andrew Tate. In my opinion, a lot of the things that he says are wrong, but he also shares tons of information who I personally was able to resonate with. Now, Andrew always talks about being energetic and waking up before your competition. If you want to learn why you may be feeling tired all the time and how to improve that, then click to watch my last video right here.